This is the first of our sustainability-focused podcasts. I'm here with Keri Craig from Interflon Scotland. Keri, can you give us a bit of information about who you are and what Interflon Scotland is?
I'm Keri, Director of Interflon Scotland. Interflon is a lubrication technology company. It's a Dutch company, and in Scotland we've been working for over 35 years across a variety of industries, from pelagic fishing boats to whisky distilleries to cashmere mills to utilities and water industry. The main focus of our work is helping our customers to do lubrication better, and we do that through our proprietary lubricating technology, which is our MICPOL technology. So these are tiny micronized and polarized particles of lubricating solid in all of our products that adhere really strongly to the metal surfaces. They help to reduce the friction and they stay on the surface for longer, helping to improve or extend lubrication intervals, protect assets for longer and keep things running.
Sustainability is something that's really important to you, isn't it?
Sustainability isn't really the first word that springs to mind when you talk about lubrication, but doing lubrication well with the right products and the right support can really unlock a lot of businesses' sustainability objectives and goals. We talk about our products being low impact, and they're low impact in a number of different ways. With the PFAS free of forever chemicals, and we're one of the few lubricant businesses who've done that across the product range. We're also looking at them from the point of view of less waste by taking a much more rationalized approach to your product needs. Gives you the opportunity to scale up by implementing, for example, a drum and a refillable solution. We're removing 5 to 8 kilos of plastic waste through single-use grease cartridges. That's 5 to 8 kilos per drum plastic waste to landfill saved. So low impact covers a huge range of areas. My background is not engineering or lubrication. I've only become involved in our family business in the last 4 years, and it's been a real eye-opener to me seeing the impact that lubrication done well can have in terms of reducing waste and reducing energy costs. I've seen that firsthand when I've gone on site with our customers.
Do you find that within B2B manufacturing and engineering that sustainability is key for them as well?
I think it's becoming increasingly important. I think it depends who you speak to in manufacturing. We have a lot of conversations with the teams that are on the tools who are trying really hard to keep things running. Front of mind for them is good lubrication keeps things working for longer. But I think increasingly what we're hearing is also an interest in the sustainability side of things. What we're seeing is an increasing focus on sustainable supply chains and requirements of suppliers to tier one companies and projects to have things in place like their net zero roadmaps and their carbon calculations. We speak to different stakeholders, and more sustainability teams are becoming part of the conversation, health and safety and compliance managers, as well as engineering and continuous improvement teams. When you actually join those teams together and the objectives together, sustainability is a theme that cuts across them all.
You've recently done a sustainability, is project the right word for it?
I was one of the participants in the Scottish Enterprise Pathways to Scale programme, which was a specific programme for female-founded and female-led businesses in Scotland looking to grow. Through that programme, we received a grant for the business, which we could invest in an area that we felt was important for our business and that would help us to accelerate growth. For me, that was around this sustainability piece. The size of team that we are and the size of business we are, there's no legal obligations for us to do that right now. And I think it would be very easy to have just said, oh, well, there's no need for us to do anything. But I really disagree with that. If you're complacent and say, oh, there's no obligation for us to do it, you end up very behind the curve, and that's not where we want to be. So it was understanding where we are currently as a business, where we aspire to be, what steps we need to take to get there. That was a piece of work we did with Thrive Consulting, who were a brilliant support for us. We did some desk research with our competitors and also our customers. We worked with Green Small Business, who helped us with our carbon footprint calculation and our net zero action plan. We've got now that all hosted on an environmental management system and tracking our progress. With Thrive, it was focused on doing our double materiality assessments. That is about understanding the specific areas within sustainability that will have most impact on your business and also the people you're working with. We were able to draw out themes that were most important for us to focus on, which included things like product life cycle, biodiversity, customer health and safety. And what that then allowed us to do was to come up with a really clear set of actions to focus on. And then the third piece of work was, how do we communicate all of this? That's obviously where the work that we were doing came in. It was around, how do we communicate both what we're doing and what we think we can support customers with in a way that's transparent and honest and isn't greenwashing. And we worked with different people to do that, including some of our customers. That has then allowed us to get to a place where we can talk about what we're doing with confidence and clarity. So that's been our area of focus. And I think now, looking ahead into next year, it will continue to be a focus, and we will start to gather pace on it and do a lot more, because I think the messaging that we have and the conversations that we're having, it's clear that it's really hitting the mark, which is important.
One of the first things we did was put some case studies together, because you were actually able to gather data on what you're doing in terms of sustainability and how much money you were saving, because they tend to go hand in hand.
We've been working in Scotland for over 35 years, and over that time we've amassed a huge number of stories of successes customers have had, results they have seen, and problems we have solved with our Interflon solutions. Through working with Jane from Thrive, it was reinforced that stories just don't cut it, sadly. It was important to look at the data behind those stories. I'd come out with all these examples and go, we've done this or we've achieved that with our customers, and she'd go, oh, that's lovely. Where's the data? Where's the evidence? And she really challenged me and pushed me to go away and get the data and document it. We've got very good relationships with customers, and they were happy to work with me to dig in and scrape away at the particular success stories and pull out the data, which was brilliant. Some of them were quite new case studies. So we worked with DevTank through the Smart Manufacturing Data Hub, and also we worked with the Institute for Manufacturing at the University of Cambridge. What we did with them was implement very simple sensor solutions with a couple of customers on a pilot basis. And the principle behind these projects was, we will record energy data over a period of time, a before period of time, to establish a baseline on industrial gearboxes. And then we did oil sampling, so we were able to check the oil condition, the levels of wear and contaminants in the oils. We then intervened in those gearboxes with one of our gearbox solutions, and then we continued to log the data. These sensor solutions provide a cloud-based visual record in real time of what is happening in that gearbox in terms of the energy savings, the draw, the current, all these things. So it was very easy to see the impact. And importantly for me was to have that third party validation. We had statistical analysts from the University of Cambridge looking at the data and pulling out the results and saying, actually, there's statistically significant results here in terms of improvements that you've achieved. So suddenly to have all this data and you go, well, how am I going to present this in a way that gives enough information that instills confidence and trust? It's about making things simple and making it easier for people to get the concept quickly and easily and take something away from it. We've come up with these really fantastic visual documents. When you've got this one page where it's the results in a glance and it's really visual, you've got a before and after, a big thing and a small thing. I think that's something that's great, and the team are now using them increasingly because the customer has said, where's the data? This is all very well and good, but have you got anything to show me to prove this? And then now they're able to say, oh, well, actually, yes, I do. So that's a really positive story. I think because something like lubrication is so technical, there's no reason for someone in a procurement team to know about lubrication. Why should they? I think as soon as you start to frame it in a way that speaks the language to different teams, they also go, oh, actually, this makes sense to my area too. You don't need to understand the differences between NLGI grades or viscosity grades or how to even apply it or lubricating intervals. There's engineers, lube techs or companies that can help you to do that, understanding the benefits that it can bring, moving the conversation away from lubrication being a consumable to it being a technology that can help deliver certain outcomes, I think it can speak to a huge number of different stakeholders. I think what we've also created is really valuable case studies for the businesses themselves. The case studies have been signed off by the business with their logo. And I think that's because they've gone, well, actually, this is something I could present to my bosses or include in my results, because it's actually really well put together. So I think that's a real added value thing that we've been able to do for those customers too, in terms of giving them something back.
And I guess that's the other side of sustainability. Your customers care about sustainability. So if you've got a case study that shows what they're doing in terms of sustainability, their marketing department's going to love that too.
Yeah, exactly. I think lubrication is such an overlooked area of engineering and maintenance of what it can deliver in terms of health and safety benefits, in terms of reliability. I was at an event earlier this week and I hadn't really thought about it this way, but lubrication actually becomes a circular economy approach to asset management. This is something that's really interesting to look at through this different lens. To be able to frame lubrication in a way that clearly shows the value it brings to a business at different levels. So it might have been in reducing CO2, it might have been in reducing costs directly in a particular project, it might have been through reducing the number of maintenance intervals. We've got a really nice case study where we've rolled out a new biomarine grease and seeing how well it is performing and the positive impact on working in an area of biodiversity. I think the case studies cover so many different angles and really highlight the value of good lubrication.
And because you've got all that data backing it up, you know you're not greenwashing, which you see a lot of people doing.
I've become hyper aware of it thanks to the work with Thrive. We've done all this work and I don't want to undermine all that work by not getting the messaging right. And then you see a lot of other messaging going out, particularly on LinkedIn, and it just misses the mark. A lot of businesses haven't really quite twigged how important it is. There's whole legislation about it now, about greenwashing. And I think that people need to take it seriously because there's legislation. You need to be so careful about your messaging because of who you're speaking to. People working in sustainability are experts in the field and they see right through it.
Have you got any stats that you want to share?
There's a lot. One of the projects that we did with a customer, we put in a number of different sensors on different assets on this site. And one of the assets, which was the one I was most interested in, brought the best results. So that was quite nice. We saw a reduction in the period of time that we were logging the data. So we saw a reduction of 70% in CO2. We saw a 9-day return on investment, like payback. So the investment made in changing the oil and upgrading the oil, the payback was in 9 days. That was a really positive result. They have also kept the sensors on, so we've been monitoring that on an ongoing basis and continue to see positive results there. We've got other case studies where people might be a bit incredulous and be like, do you really need less of the Interflon grease than the other one that we've been using? And there's a really nice case study with Ullapool Harbour on the link span bridges and the passenger bridges. There we saw a reduction in maintenance interventions specifically for relubrication. And one asset, if I'm not mistaken, it was 10 interventions down to 4 in a year and 7 down to 2 on another asset. They were continuing to monitor that because the grease was working so well. One example that we have where products were used for circuit breaker maintenance on oil rigs offshore, that was quite an astounding figure. It was from 90% failure rate to 0. Wow. It doesn't really get much better than that. Another story where we have worked to install an auto lubrication system with a customer where they were experiencing up to 15 weeks of downtime a year on this one particular bit of the asset that had to be sent overseas for repair. And since putting in the auto lubrication system in November 2023, so yeah, 2 years now, that bit of the asset hasn't broken down. And actually in the summer, on my insistence, we went in to do another service on the system, and we had to dial back the grease usage. So they're using even less grease than originally. So those are really positive results. If you think about that, up to 15 weeks of downtime reduced but also the carbon involved in that by having to send parts overseas to be repaired. That's been eliminated on that particular asset. That's such a positive story, and it makes me really happy to know that we've been able to help someone to do that in their business. It's really positive.
And the other thing is you need to use less of it.
Well, exactly. Lasts for longer.
And when you talk about all those sustainability benefits as well, all of a sudden that's even more, like, less maintenance that needs to be done. Production running longer in manufacturing, so more product is produced.
Yeah.
All of these things. I imagine it stacks up to quite a lot of money.
It does. I would love to do a case study that stacks up all the benefits and the savings and the additional production benefits through doing lubrication well.
Might be a long case study. It even costs money to have packaging taken away.
It does. And I think that's part of what is really important as well. It's about product life cycle as well. So it's how much does this £3-4 tube of grease actually really cost when you factor in all of those things and the waste and the disposal of the waste. It's probably quite a bit more than £3 or £4 actually.
Trying to improve your sustainability is a no-brainer because actually you're almost guaranteed to impact the bottom line. There wasn't really a page that existed on the Interflon website that drilled into sustainability. So we created one specifically for Interflon Scotland.
Yeah, that's right. One of the great things about Interflon is that we have a global reach. We're in over 50 countries, which gives us the opportunity to draw on customer experience and results from a huge variety of countries. But one of the challenges we have is localizing the website. And it was important for me that we could have a place to show what we're doing in sustainability, to show our commitments, to show that we've implemented an EMS, achieved certification and are working towards certain goals. But also our biggest impact is really in how we support our customers through different areas. So the best way for us to do that was through this landing page, which I think works nicely. It's got the key information, it's got our policies. What has really struck me in terms of its value is that when you look at the analytics, people are spending time on it. They're spending time engaging with the content on the page than the other pages on our website, which to me indicates that what's there is of interest, which is great. I think that just highlights to me that it was an important thing to do.
Do you think there's anything more that the industry should be doing in terms of improving sustainability?
I think there's a lot of good stuff happening. I think where I see opportunity to do a bit more is as a supplier, particularly in Scotland, there's such a clear drive across all industries towards net zero. And I think Scotland are really clear in terms of having targets for industry. And a lot of the companies we work with are engaging really well with supply chains in terms of achieving that. I think it's cross-cutting. So many people look at sustainability through the environmental lens, and it's so much more than that. It was actually something that came up in this event I was at the other day, that there's so much focus on net zero and businesses achieving net zero, and they're engaging with their supply chains, and some of them are doing that really, really brilliantly. But there's a lot of focus on CapEx, so capital expenditure to achieve sustainable outcomes for the business. There's a huge amount of investment happening in things like solar panels. When you think of lubrication, it's under your operational expenditures, it's OPEX, and actually potentially deliver much more immediate results that benefit the bottom line, but also really help make measurable progress towards sustainability goals. I think it's an area that should be looked at with more of a critical. There's a lot of work happening in tier one companies, sustainable supplier engagement happening. You see it a lot with a lot of the projects that are happening in infrastructure projects in Scotland. There's so much investment in our country into new infrastructure projects, renewables, and everywhere. And I think there's a real interest in developing the supply chain, but I also feel it's still at a certain level. And sometimes as a small business where you have a good solution that can help, it's hard to get onto people's radars. We attend a lot of supply chain webinars and events, and there's always lots of invitations to get in touch if you have a solution. And the follow through isn't necessarily always there. And I think that's partly on businesses like ourselves in terms of looking at how we communicate, what we communicate, and who we are communicating to. But I do think there's also an onus on industry and the bigger company to also take a critical look at how we engage with different levels of the supply chain. We supply the supply chain of the tier ones. So actually There's a benefit from saying, how do we engage with the whole supply chain? There's lots of people that work in reliability and condition monitoring in this space where I think there's huge value with the right type of engagement. That's why it's great for me to have the opportunity to speak with you and do a podcast and present at the conference and speed pitch at the supplier event. Suddenly you start to feel like you're in the room with the right people and you're having an opportunity to share something that hopefully they want to hear or didn't realize they wanted to hear once they've heard it. I think the more opportunities that we can have to speak about what we do and what the benefits are, hopefully the more change that might bring.
And do you feel like the various industry bodies are helping promote sustainability and how to achieve that?
I think there's a lot happening. We're hosting a webinar. We can share these tools. We're doing this, or we're offering you these things. And I think it's all very well intentioned. And I've no doubt that a lot of it is very useful. My own personal experience was complete overwhelm. There's all these tools. There's all these resources. Where do I begin with this? And it was huge amounts of overwhelm. And I think it's a shame because I think there must be other people who feel a bit like me. They want to do more and it's forthcoming in terms of resources, but it's almost too much. I was very fortunate with the grant to be able to focus and target the help needed and bring in people to help me with that. And because was also able to accelerate it. I mean, goodness me, if I'd been trying to wade through all the different resources, I think I would still be exactly where I was 18 months ago. It wasn't very far. My way of doing things is sometimes you just need here's the information. What you need to do is ABC, more of a kind of framework approach. Rather than here's all this information, or you could speak to this body or that body. There's a lot of free resources there, but how good are some of the free resources in terms of actually getting you where you need to be in terms of supplier expectations? That said, there are some brilliant pieces of work happening with businesses. Forth Ports do great stuff in terms of their sustainable supply chain. They do a program with Net Zero Nation that has been very successful. There's a lot of work happening in certain regions of Scotland with Net Zero Nation and bringing in businesses, and is very supported in terms of this is what you need to do and we're going to help you to do that. Similarly, SSE Distribution, they do a lot of supplier engagement around sustainability, a lot of communicating around this is where we're at, this is where we need our suppliers to be, and very open in terms of saying get in touch with us if you need help with this. They've got targets around how much of their supply chain has been enabled to meet certain targets as well. There are some really good pieces of work happening. I don't want to be all negative, but it's really important to try and work out who you need to speak to and who can help you. And I think that's the thing, information overload, and you can drown in that. In my case, it was bringing in Thrive and Green Small Business to help me, and I had the luxury of a grant to help do that. There are other routes you can go, but I think that's the thing, it's bringing in other help. So it might be through an organisation like Net Zero Nation, or engaging with one of your bigger customers to help find what you actually need to do. Because I think sometimes it's just there's too much information and it's difficult to know where to start.
The other area that I'm looking at is education. Do you think educators need to do more to help future employees of businesses to understand sustainability, or even upskill existing people in industry to understand sustainability?
I think that for a lot of people, sustainability is just this very kind of vague term, and actually you really need to ground it into practical terms in terms of what does this actually mean for me in my business or in the role that I do. So if I'm in charge of lubrication of this bottling conveyor line, what am I doing in my everyday role that is actually contributing to my company's sustainability goals? And actually, it's quite a lot. Someone said nothing is sustainable. So it drives me mad when people say this is a sustainable lubricant. No, nothing is sustainable. It's what you do with it, how you work with it or behave with it. We try to talk about a sustainable approach to lubrication, using lubrication to help drive your sustainability outcomes, which might be a number of different things. But I think it's around actually picking it apart a little bit and going, what does it actually mean? What does it mean for me if I'm in this role or that role? Maybe that's a hugely time-consuming task for businesses to do. I think it depends also how you're performance managing your teams. My previous life, we had our deliverables, which reported up to the corporate level deliverables, and you had to tie them in. So I don't know, are people reporting on their sustainability deliverables, in which case I'm greasing the bearings and this is helping drive the sustainability goal of reducing waste. Make it clear and tangible.
I'll be talking to educators, people who go into schools, NMIS, National Manufacturing Institute, universities as well. So hopefully I'll start to get better understanding of whether apprentices and people doing engineering degrees are being taught about sustainability.
I think from the simple focus of lubrication as a tool that can support sustainable outcomes, I don't think there's a huge focus on sustainability in degree programs like mechanical engineering. It's still considered quite niche. And for me, it's a bit like, wow, you're learning to make things or look after things that are moving. The lubricating of them, the tribology element of that is something that should be taught. And I don't think it really is. When you think about lubrication as a small part, but how it feeds the bigger picture and sustainability, am I teaching about sustainability or am I teaching about things that you can do in a more sustainable way? And I think that's where there are gaps and opportunities to enhance. That's something we're hoping to look at in 2026 is how do we support educating people more in the Scottish industrial community around lubrication, because I think it's something that's not quite there. It's so interesting because when we do things like toolbox talks and you start explaining to people in a particular way, you can see them going, oh yeah, that's kind of obvious. There must be other elements that you could bring into programs that also enhance that awareness of actions that support sustainable outcomes.
Do you have anything to plug?
I would encourage people to take a look at our sustainability landing page. There you see examples of the work that Samantha helped us with at Labrikita. Also more information about our commitments to sustainability as Interflon Scotland and how we're working with our customers. If you want to get in touch with us, there's a contact form through that website. You can just type into Google smart lubrication less waste and you'll get the page.
Wherever this goes out, I'll put that link.
You can also connect with us through LinkedIn. We are Interflon Scotland Limited. So there's lots of Interflons on LinkedIn. We are specifically Interflon Scotland Limited. So you'll get more information about some of the work we do and the projects we're working on.
Brilliant. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. Thank you for having me.
And thank you everyone for listening.